Hello, once again, I'm BR Schultz, SP500. Thank you for joining me. It is August 18th. Basically, what I did is I took all my price termination targets, created one more actually, and then I summarized them in a table. And basically, I want to discuss why I think 7,300 might be the rough termination zone of February of 2026. And yeah, so the price termination point of roughly 64.80s seems to be holding. And once you summarize kind of the different data points, it kind of gives you a higher level heat map, if you will. And then you see some type of patterns kind of sticking out. So that was kind of what I wanted to draw out here in today's quick video, going into the next 5, 6, 7 months. Thank you. So yeah, if you want to review overall timing, you can go back and review part 22 of the Great Depression, looking for that August 25th low and markets roughly for the short term. But for the macro scale, essentially for the pricing targets, I tried to summarize it in a table, all of the predictions of the model. And 2931 is where markets peaked in 2018 before they crashed, and then markets ran up into roughly 3400 area in 2020 before they crashed, and then at the end of 2021 you can see the highlighted in blue. It had two hits around 4800, and that's where we topped out in late 2021, early 2022. And then basically with the 5 pricing points, it kind of weights them low weighting to high. So as you might expect, as you get more hits on the higher weighting, it has more of a higher probability, a much higher probability of causing a major peak in the markets. And so we saw that around the 6140, 6137, 6130 mark from the model, and interestingly enough, it predicted that point in 2020, 2022, and 2023. So that gave a very high weighting for a market peak around that zone, and that's what happened at the end of 2024, early 2025. That's where we topped out at, and then we crashed heavily, right? And so now you're seeing also the same type of pattern unfolding right now for the 7300 region. So around that 7300 mark, I believe we could have a major capitulation in price, and then we'd have some type of major drawdown. So obviously the 4800 was very important in markets. 6150 roughly, 6100, 6200 was very important to markets crashing, and obviously 3400, obviously 2931 at the end of 2018. And I think what we're going to see is a very similar situation when we get up near 7200, 7300. When we start getting around that 7300 mark, I think we could be looking at another 10-20% market correction. And so I think this helps me at least look at the weighting scenario of where I think markets will top out at, where they'll hit their final peak at and then crash. I'm looking for the macro peaks in this, obviously. And then you can also see that the model's already highlighting that 8800 mark after that. So after we crash, after we reach about 7300, and then we have some 10 to 20% correction in markets, then we could run back up into our next peak could be somewhere around 8800 in the S&P 500. And again, this is a journey into the macro peak in markets in late 2030, and then we'll see a 3.4 year recession / depression window period into early to mid 2034 for the final bottom. That's my prediction. we should have a first macro peak in markets in early 2028, then some type of doldrums in the markets into late 2020, early 2029 for wave 1 down, and then wave 2 up on the macro scale would be into late 2030, and then wave 3 down would be the crushing effect on the economy from 2031 through 2033, and then a final leg down of some sort in early 2034 or into mid 2034, and that should be the bottom, is my opinion. But so I want to keep it to a short video today, but essentially I like this kind of heat map. Really drew out the 6100 region, 6150 region, and the 4800 level, and yeah, the 2931 is very interesting as well because it was the last number of the series. I think because markets have 5 waves, I think maybe 5 predictions is a little more fitting than 4. Like in the last video, I came up with one more number sequence that I find very fitting for markets and seem to obviously hit with column 4 and 5 really contain some of the biggest peaks in markets before market crashes. And I'm sure if I went back and studied markets in 2017, 2015, things like that, perhaps the 3400 might pop out into the higher weighting summary table. So don't be surprised if maybe in the future I've studied that and dropped it in the table, and you see something with a 3400 region or 3300 region market for that early 2020 peak for a top. But the 2930 was spot on, the 4809 was spot on, the 6137 was spot on. Let's see if the 7300 level is spot on, and then the highest weighting obviously is really weighting the 8800 region pretty heavily as well. So I really find the highest rating of column 4 and 5 really interesting. That it really nailed all, the 6100, the 2930, the 4800, and hopefully the 7300 will have a pretty big crash. But I'm not sure how big the crash will be in October of 2025. The VIX weekly model is picking it up and saying that there should be some type of major move in the VIX in October, so I don't know how bad that will be. Yeah, I mean, maybe we hit, I had to change the third number, so it's not 6885 anymore. I think the last video said somewhere around 6880. I've updated that a little bit because I went back and tested the mid row, and it seemed to hit a lot better with some of these other past predictions. I think might have been 5740 seemed to be pretty important for a market peak in 2024 maybe, or 2023. So I've gone back and tested a few of those, so I think that would be a better fit for, it's a slight reduction, but I think that 6800 range could be where we are in the beginning of October. Then we could crash into around October 20th, late October for a bottom, and then we could markets could rocket up into that 7300 region, and then we could have that 10 or 20% correction. But again, I don't know how bad the correction will be in October. But if we do get up to that 7300 region around February, I think we could really see a very strong market collapse. No, I shouldn't say collapse. Market crash. Could be a 10 or 20% correction crash, and then we'll run back up to about 8800 is what I'm predicting. So I like the heat map version a lot better, I think, than just helter skelter print screens. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this. So the optimal, I use the word optimal because I'm trying to say the best case, best fit. The optimal scenario would be that we run up into about 7250 to 7400 into early February, and then we crash 20% maybe into mid-late March, maybe early April. So thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, I'm B.R. Schultz, SP500. Again, this is just a snippet of the GoFundMe page. I didn't want you to forget that, so thank you. And please bookmark it, whatever, and watch it over the next decade. or into late 2034. Thank you so much.